So good morning. Again, my name is Tara Beebe, and I'll be hosting our hour here. We're super excited to have such a great set of panelists with us today, and obviously be discussing something that is top of mind for many people in the industry. So we're going to have a lot of fun. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Jonathan, you can go to the next slide here, and I'd love to introduce our speakers. We have Robert, Brian, and Jonathan joining us today. And so I'd love to have little brief introductions before we cover the agenda here. So Robert, let's start with you.
Hey, good morning. I appreciate you inviting me, Tara. My name is Robert Capperly. I'm the Vice President of Risk and Compliance with U.S. Logistics Solutions. We have about 575 power units, 700 trailers, 22 locations around the eastern part of the United States, about 2.6 million square feet in warehouse space. Just personally, I live south of Nashville. I've been in transportation over 35 years. Started working in transportation out of high school. When I got out of, when I turned 21, I got my CDL, drove for years, and still have my CDL, drive every once in a while for a local high school band. So transportation's in my blood.
Love it. Thank you, Robert. Brian.
Sure, I'll jump in. I'm Brian Phillip. I'm the CTO and head of product for Idelic. I do not have my CDL, but I did learn to drive a grain truck before a car when I was young, so I know a little bit about larger vehicles. My career has mostly been focused on using data integrations, software, and advanced analytics to help companies better identify and prioritize and react to risk. And I did that for about 15 years on the insurance side before joining Idelic. And in the last 2 years, I've been taking all the lessons that I learned on the insurance side and being able to pull that into the commercial trucking industry now.
Awesome. And Jonathan.
Good morning, Tara. Thanks for having me. My name is Jonathan Bykowski. I'm the Director of Customer Experience here at Idelic. Next week, actually, I've been with Idelic for 6 years, which is pretty wild. I've had the chance to work with just about every single one of our customers through onboarding, retention, ensuring that they're seeing the ROI inside of our product. Before Idelic, I spent about 15 years kind of at the intersection of business operations and technology for some of the world's largest retailers. And just happy to be here and talk about what's going on in 2024.
I love it. Thank you. Well, we have a good group here today, and I hope we get some questions and some great dialogue that's going to happen here. But ultimately, we wanted to do this before the year ended because we know a lot of our customers and a lot of fleet leaders out there are thinking about reflecting on what's happened in 2023 and also considering how to prepare for 2024. Obviously we went through kind of a rebalancing of the market coming, the economic surge driven by the pandemic. We have oversupply of capacity. And really what we're experiencing is the shrinking that is occurring, right? And the strain in the market that's currently there. So you don't have to look far to see headlines that essentially say, okay, we're gonna continue this trend a little bit, at least into 2024. And so what we want to do was bring together a group of experts, some obviously in technology, some obviously working with, hundreds of different fleets, and Robert, kind of our man of the hour, who is actually out there as a leader in a large fleet. So this will be a great dialogue. One of the things that we are going to do is to actually hear from each other as peers. So throughout this event, you're going to see a handful of poll questions that'll come up. Love to have you answer them. We'll be sharing those results live and discussing them. So if we take a look at what's going to happen over this next hour, you can see here's the journey we're going to go on. We're going to start with kind of business strategy. We're going to talk about what some of those headwinds might be and how we can focus on profitability. And then we'll move into what will be kind of the theme of the hour, which is really looking at operational efficiency and how fleets should be thinking about technology over this next year, using data to make decisions, and talk through some potential impacts to safety program optimization. And then finally, we will end on a high note, and we will talk about how we create resiliency in our fleets and focus on driver retention, ensuring employees are engaged, even if, let's say, the market climate isn't optimum, and then we'll kind of dive into the future a little bit. So with that, I think, Jonathan, I want to start and kind of set the stage, and hopefully everyone has seen these stats before. So ATRI released its 2023 top issues, critical issues research in October. And, I was looking at this week, and part of it is what prompted us to do this event is, it was, and it's validating, I suppose, to see that, if you looked at 2022 and 2023, the economy actually climbed from number 5 in 2022 to number 1 in 2023. In addition, a few other call outs there, lawsuit abuse reform also climbed, and driver distraction appeared on the list for the first time since 2018. So, as I was reflecting on these, as we were reflecting on these as a group, this starts to ring really, really true of what we're experiencing in the market and in our fleets. So the key is, how do we think about strategies to either mitigate this, address this, even weather this, and all of those are viable approaches. So I want to start, and Jonathan, you can go ahead and take down that slide. I want to start with our first poll question for the audience and find out a little bit about how you and your own business are thinking about strategies for 2024. So this is an exciting moment because we are doing this for the first time. So let's see what happens. Question number 1 for our audience. In light of the current economic conditions, which business strategies are you adopting? And if you're paying attention, hopefully go ahead and answer. We haven't lost you yet. Seeing some answers come in. Give it another second. Always interesting. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this. I want everyone to be able to see the results. Last call. All right, here we go. So I'll share these out and you can see them. So if we take a look at those who have joined us here today, interesting. So, or not interesting, that prioritizing cost efficiency and budget management are kind of top of mind. Obviously like to see the increased investment in technology. So this is good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this with you. And I want to actually move over to our panelists and hear a little bit more of what they're thinking also. So Robert, I want to start with you, and you can kind of reflect obviously on what you just saw from the audience. How is U.S. logistics thinking about 2024 and some of the more high-level business strategies as we come into this next year?
Well, there's several things that we're doing. We're really looking at cost savings initiatives, looking at the vendor relationships that we had, the things that we're spending our money on. We're really focused on the revenue that we're pulling in from our frontline people, the people that are out on the streets, out on the docks, generating revenue. We're very cognizant of making sure that that revenue doesn't go out the back door. So we're very focused on our revenue. We're looking at every rock, turning over every rock, every contract we're reviewing. We are making adjustments in our fuel network. We're making adjustments in the way we audit our invoicing. We're dealing with vendor relationships, negotiating pricing, bulk pricing. We're turning over every stone. So just the poll just showed that we're on the right track with what our viewers are doing as well, and what their concerns are is we're digging through every opportunity to save that revenue. We're also looking at operations and combining routes, slip seating, backhaul options, doing accessorial reviews, making sure that if we have an accessorial that we've got a way to capture that revenue that we're owed. We talked about maintenance costs and scrutinizing everything. And then just third-party agreements for back-end support, reviewing those contracts and working with vendors.
That makes sense. Jonathan, I'm curious, obviously you're working with fleets of all sizes and locations daily. Anything to add there that you're seeing from the market?
I think previously we saw a lot of growth. We saw a lot of growth around safety teams, around innovation, around pulling in different types of technology. And now, as we go into, I would say, the latter part of 2023 and then into 2024, it's about resiliency. It's about how can we innovate and do more with less or do more with the same. I talked with a Fortune 10 company last week. I was on site with them. One of the things they talked about was they were not hiring in 2024 for their safety team in 2025. That their first hire will come in 2025 for that safety team. So they've got to figure out how to run their fleet with the same safety team throughout the next, 12 to 18 months. So they have to figure out how they can continue to maintain the right operational level of efficiency and remain effective in the current climate.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of combine a couple of these questions since, and Robert, you already gave some really great examples, but I want to, click in a little bit on the operational efficiency. And I think that's probably the most resounding theme that we're hearing from a lot of fleets as they're planning for this next year. Robert, I want to start with you a little bit. As you're thinking through these kind of strategies for this next year, what are some of the, let's say, more simple or straightforward things that you're considering that can help reduce costs but don't cut corners on safety or your service levels?
Well, I can tell you, we are not going to cut corners on safety. So if we evaluate what we're doing, and if it's going to jeopardize what we're doing from a safety perspective, we're just not going to do that. So, and that is a cultural corporate decision that everyone needs to evaluate. And really it comes down to, we're talking about cost savings. So, and saving every penny that we can. And a lot of people don't think about how safety impacts your bottom line. But from a claims perspective and an insurance premium perspective and a rate perspective, when you're going to talk to clients about, renewing contracts and your SMS scores are high, there's going to be questions and concerns. So really, that's the first thing we do when we're looking at cost savings measures. We're taking those things into consideration. Also, we're looking at low hanging fruit. If we've got, we went through and evaluated our fuel program, and there was a ton of savings in our fuel program that we realized. Consolidating our platforms and our back office software solutions is another where, if we can consolidate platforms and we can have them talk to each other and through APIs, it increases our productivity and could lessen our headcount. So, those are the things that we're really looking at. Every stone, like I said earlier, every stone gets unturned, from operational efficiencies, routing, slip seating. We're evaluating every piece of equipment. Are we utilizing it? If we're not utilizing it, then if it's a lease trailer, we're going back. It's going back. If it's a company-owned piece of equipment, we're making sure it's on the road so we can turn in a piece of leased equipment. So utilization is key as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. A great segue, the focus on cost cutting, and there's lots of different areas of the business that you can evaluate technology is one of them. And we know we operate in an industry that you have a pretty most fleets these days have a pretty significant tech stack. And so it's important to know which ones are driving value, which ones play well with others, which ones are just kind of legacy, and maybe there's overlap. And I'd love to move to our second poll question and kind of hear from the audience how you're thinking specifically around technology into this next year. So our second question, and love to have some answers come in, is regarding technology investments in the upcoming year. What is going to be your approach? I'll give it a couple minutes here. See some answers. Get a few more responses in here.
So while we're waiting on the answers to that, one other thing to piggyback on, we were talking about earlier about cost savings initiatives. We're really looking at our support team structures from a corporate level, and restructuring the way our organization works. So there's more accountability and easier to manage our organization. So there's cost savings initiatives there as well.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about team structure here. So in this next part, but everyone kind of see the results here from the group, and I would imagine they probably look similar if we had more responses that came in. So at the top, or kind of at the top, a real focus on getting the most out of existing technology. That makes sense. And for all of us, regardless of the industry, I think it's probably pretty safe to say we all know we have technology that we're utilizing, or I should say underutilizing in our organizations. And it is a great time to kind of look at it and say, what else can you do? What aren't we using? Get into the actual unique workflows. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that. And I want to talk a little bit more about technology. So Brian, as the technology guy at the table, how are you seeing Idalic's customers, things that you're doing in market? How are you seeing technology support this focus on optimizing operations?
There's like a million different directions you can go with, technology, a lot of different ways that you can use it. And we see people use it in, automation, prioritization, anomaly detection, data aggregation, predictive analytics. Like, these are all different areas that you can go and explore. I think some are, to be honest, a little bit farther out than are really useful to the industry right now, today, with the conditions that they're facing going into 24, like automation. We'll get there as an industry and all the technologies. I think that'll have a huge impact on us over the next, kind of 3 to 5 year time frame, but probably not 24. And I think as you look at 24, I feel like it's more about prioritization for most of our customers. Time's more limited than ever. We potentially have even fewer resources than we're used to working with. And yet, to Robert's point, you need to go out there and turn over every stone and kind of scrape for every penny. Well, how do you go and put extra effort into doing that kind of research and turning over every stone when you have even fewer people to go and do it, right? And that's where those prioritization and triage tools, I think, can come in and be really, really helpful. And not in just one area. You can prioritize litigation risk, looking at the accidents and prioritizing those that are most likely to go through litigation expensive. There's tools to help you go through and triage your accounts receivables backlog and really make sure that you're focusing on where you're going to get the cash flow in. Most of us are already using route optimization, things like that. In my time at Solera, we spent a lot of effort on predictive maintenance and being able to prioritize your maintenance activities to drive down cost and increase reliability. And then, of course, on the safety side, right, focusing more on the driver coaching and the optimization there when it comes to really making sure that the limited number of safety resources that you have and people and talent are focused on the biggest bang for the buck, right? How do you really, really know where you can spend your time that's going to have the greatest ability to reduce accidents and reduce costs for the organization? So again, I think prioritization and use of the limited resources to me is the most valuable place where technology can kind of contribute as you're going into kind of economic headwinds.
Mm-hmm. Robert, anything to add on that as you reflect on US logistics?
Absolutely. So from a technology perspective, evaluating your current stable of products that you're utilizing, the best resource in evaluating how you're using that piece of software and how you can get the best bang for your buck, the best value, is talking to the vendor. They know that product better than anybody. So if you bring that vendor in and say, this is how we're using it, how can we utilize it better? You're already paying for it. Utilize every piece of that software that you can, every tool that you can. Make sure that there are connectivity APIs that connect and work with other pieces of software, because the last thing you want is your people having to go from system to system to system to try to dig up data to make good decisions. So you're talking about utilizing software to increase performance and increase decision making. So the best people to tell you how to do that is the vendor that sells you the product. So that's where we're going, is we're talking to our vendors. We're consolidating platforms, working through API connections, looking for value and actionable data that we get from the products. That's what we're looking for from a technology perspective, whether it's cameras, whether it is predictive analytics, whether it is MVR monitoring or roadside data. We want that seamless so we can make the best decisions. And if there's an issue, we want to address it right now.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on one thing that Robert said that I loved is, hey, go and talk to your vendors. They know your technology better than anybody, right? I think that's 100% spot on. And going beyond that, have your vendors talk to each other. I've had a couple of really interesting experiences in the last month or two where one of our clients or another has asked us to sit down with another one of their key vendors and say, hey, here's two of our strategic partners. Here's the challenges we're dealing with. Let's get some more smart people in the same room. And those have been really interesting and useful discussions. It's one thing when you talk to your vendors. It's another thing when your vendors are talking to each other. It's another thing when all three of you are in the same room. And in both those instances, there was actually no necessarily collaborative action item that came out of it where we're working to do something different with that other vendor, but it gave both us and that other vendor some unique ideas to take back and be able to help that specific client with the challenges they were facing. So just another approach, right, to kind of break out of the traditional thinking is get two of your vendors in the room at the same time.
Sarah, I need to jump in as well.
I know you do. I can tell.
Right off what Robert said, I mean, the conversation we had last week with this company, Fortune 500 company that's not hiring, it was around efficiency. Safety team of 2, trying to manage anything and everything. They were hand entering in data. And we called things off and said, hold on, where's the data coming from? Let's get the right resources in here. So we brought in one of their IT resources and we said, your HR data can come from here. Let's integrate and find a quick way to bring in your telematic, your camera data, and get a full driver profile instead of you having to hand enter in everything. We can take that resource that spends hours upon hours every single week hand entering in data, right? And instead pivot them to be able to pick up a phone and call a driver around the data they're seeing. You know, it's having those conversations, bringing the right people to the table. And maybe it's internal resources, or as Brian said, maybe it's with another vendor, but get them to the table, bring that data together, right? And then use the resource you have to be more efficient and have the right conversations around things like safety or operations.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you, and the segues nicely. And I want to launch our third poll. So each of you have been talking. I hear data would be a key word if we had a word cloud up here. And so I'd like to transition and talk a little bit about how you're considering using data the same, differently, coming into this next year to drive faster, better, more informed decisions, right? So there's obviously operational KPI type reporting, but then you also have the ability potentially with artificial intelligence, machine learning application starts to think about reporting and analytics that are more predictive, right? And so I'm going to launch this next poll here for the group. And the question is, in your view, how will the role of data analytics, use of artificial intelligence, machine learning evolve how fleets make business decisions into this next year? Give it a couple minutes for people to read these answers. No one's answered the last one, so yet. But that's okay if that was your answer. Give just another second here. Some good responses coming in. All right, I'm gonna end the last call. Here we go, and share this out. So several people seeing it as significant, and then the other half kind of saying limited, little to no impact into the future. So on this one, because obviously this is something that Idelic thinks about a lot, because we know there's so much data across the industry. And Robert, you said it, right? Hey, we got to look for APIs, integrations that make sense, that bring this together. Brian, I want to start with you on that and your thoughts on poll results or otherwise.
I'm going to agree with the poll results that I personally think it's, when you talk specifically about AI and ML and those sorts of things, I think it's moderate. I think it's already having impact, and maybe you don't see it because it's kind of wrapped into some of your other services that you're using. You just don't realize there's AI underneath the covers, as there is with Idalic's solution, for example. It's all AI and ML based, but you may not think of it in that way. I think timeframes are important here. If you're looking out a few years into the future, I think it is indeed going to be transformational and disruptive, and we're going to see a lot of automation that really is driven by AI and is going to really change the way that the industry operates. Whether it's dispatch or maintenance or safety coaching or whatever it is, I think it's going to touch all areas of the business. In the shorter term, I think it's a little bit more subtle, and I think where technology probably makes the biggest difference in the short term, or maybe it's talking about data. You were talking about data a minute ago, Tara. I think that's where it's really important. It's that data analytics piece is really important right now. Going back to what Robert said of, again, turning over every stone, looking for the opportunities. I think that's where people need to be focusing a lot of their technology here. I talked about prioritization earlier, but I think in addition to that, visibility is really, really important. How can you find those pennies and make them count and add them up? How do you find that marginal gain, right? The things that maybe weren't really worth going and figuring out before, or maybe weren't worth going and even looking for before. Now all of a sudden you're in a position where you're like, I have to figure that out. I need to know what's happening behind the scenes here, because I need to squeeze every ounce of blood out of that turnip. So that, a huge place where technology plays a role there is being able to bring all that data together in a way that makes it more useful and usable. And I would argue, my opinion is, spreadsheets don't cut it anymore. Spreadsheets are helpful if you know exactly what you're looking for and you're putting the data in there to go and seek the answer that you already know to look for. I think most of the people on this webinar are beyond that. They've already figured that out. They've captured the low-hanging fruit, and they've probably even climbed up the tree and shaken some of the branches farther up. Like, there is no more low-hanging fruit to go after. You need to dig a lot deeper, and technology can help you do that, right? Get out of the spreadsheet and get into a platform that makes it easier to visualize that data, work with it, run different kind of scenarios, easily kind of toggle in and out to look at what's happening in different terminals and over different time frames and different scenarios of activity and what the impact is of those activities. You just can't do that fast enough or easily enough when you're working with raw data in spreadsheets. You've got to have some sort of a platform to help you with that analysis. So that's where I think the AI and ML piece is most useful, or technology piece is most useful right now to people solving the immediate problems. And the more disruptive stuff's going to come a couple of years down the road.
Right. Robert, your perspective on this one?
I have to agree. I think that right now, AI in the transportation field, especially with uh, operational awareness, is not reliable. It's getting there, but there are still a lot of questions from the operations side. I had a conversation with our operations group yesterday, as a matter of fact, about route optimization, and they were explaining how a tool that was developed a couple of years ago wasn't sufficient enough to increase utilization on route optimization because it didn't learn the habits of the drivers as they ran the routes. Well, as AI increases and those route optimization programs learn those individual drivers' habits and how they work and the average time for delivery and all those things taken into consideration, as AI learns that, those programs are going to be able to duplicate the decisions that we're making from an operational perspective faster than we can. But right now, there's a lag in confidence in what we've had in the past and what we have now. And I think that lag it's just going to have to, we're just going to have to show people that it is a viable solution. And AI in the hiring process, same thing. As we learn and AI continues to be implemented, I see in the hiring process predictive analytics. This driver has these violations or has these habits. Train them in this, and it continues to learn those drivers' habits and continues to provide suggestions for training. So AI in our field is wide open. There's opportunities, but it's going to have to be proven. But there's definitely uses for it, and it will continue to grow.
Robert, off of your comment around, it's going to continue to grow, and I think you have to have faith in it too, right? And you've got to believe and know that you have to change as a fleet. And we get asked a lot, I'm using a scorecard today. What's the difference, right? And how do we go from a spreadsheet scorecard, which we've been doing for years? We've got our metric. How do I have faith in that your machine learning is going to, identify my risky driver versus what I know in my own proven method? And that's where we have to start talking about the amount of data and the scenarios that are there and what machine learning can do, because it's looking at more than just your fleet and your experiences, right? You start looking at a much, much bigger data set and more scenarios, and we see repeatable patterns. In order to get people into that faith, what we do is we start with a single driver, right? Like, let's show out that example of where, and let's compare your scorecard to machine learning. And then let's pick a driver, and then let's show what happens, right? Once we identify that risk, how we address that risk and why this works. And I think you need to use data. Again, once you've got the data, you need to then use the data and showcase and highlight and be transparent around, listen, we identified using, some sort of machine learning model, this specific driver, whether it's pre-hire or post-hire, and these are the results that we had afterwards. We want you to know that we've got faith in this, and you can't have, it's tough to have blind faith. You can have it, but it's really tough. But you need those examples to pull it out to get others on board. And you've got to find that champion within your fleet that's willing to do that and willing to kind of show off, I use this and these are the results that I've got, and I'm a fan, I'm in.
Yeah. And you know what? From those of us that aren't from Missouri, but do live by, show me rule. It's hard to go into a safety program and use these analytical tools and show the results are no results. We're not having accidents, right? So it's yes, we've done this and something didn't happen. So
Yeah.
that's part of the challenge as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I want to be sensitive to time, and I want to actually transition a little bit or build, Robert, upon what you're talking about. I want to get back to kind of the safety programs and safety teams specifically in the context of ways that we can consider reducing costs or optimizing, but not sacrificing our service levels and certainly not the safety. So just a little food for thought. Expert Market did some research here with a little over 300 participants or so, and of fleet executives, and they came back and said about 48% of the respondents listed driver safety as their top operational priority coming into this next year. The converse of that means that 52% did not have driver safety at the top of their list. And if you think about, I think, Robert, you might have mentioned it, or Jonathan mentioned it earlier, when fleets are looking at ways to reduce costs, often they're looking at that total cost of risk, which is inclusive of, yes, insurance premiums, but all the other programs that that are operating in their fleet to reduce risk, right? And, related to insurance, what you see, and everyone's probably familiar with this, right? You're increasing your deductibles, which means, sure, your premiums may go down, but ultimately a fleet is taking on significantly more risk in-house. And, if you're a really safe fleet, that could feel appealing on the front end, but if you have a road incident, an accident, that could be catastrophic, right? And so I want to start with you, Robert, a little bit on this one. I think just to validate like pros and cons to that approach for fleets and your perspective there.
Yeah, you know what? It is tempting to look at safety as a cost center that doesn't generate revenue. And I understand where that comes from. When you look at P&Ls and you look at costs and you look at revenue generation and you take all those things into consideration, then you're going to look at safety as something that doesn't generate revenue, right? But it brings value to your organization. It saves you money in your insurance premiums.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you when you go to the negotiating table with your customers or brokers, and you can say, yeah, my rates are a little bit higher, but you get these safety scores. And you can validate that, you can justify that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you've got claims that you're not paying with a good safety program, claims that you're saving, the wear and tear on the vehicle. If you've got good SMS scores, you're not going through roadside inspections as much. You're not spending as much on fuel. You're not spending as much on wear and tear on your maintenance, brakes, fifth wheel, everything that goes into stopping and starting a vehicle, and operational time. Every time a driver goes through a roadside inspection, they lose time. So you lose operational efficiency. So, you know what? It's tempting to say, yeah, this is costing us money from an overhead perspective. But really, it's if you do it right, the value that safety brings to your organization, it far outweighs what you pay. And the other thing is, there's tons to take into consideration, but a good safety program that has good scores and has good safety culture, almost 100% of the time, if everything else is equal, you're going to have better driver retention rates because drivers are going to feel valued. So there is no downside to a good, solid, active safety program.
Yeah. Brian or Jonathan, anything else to add? Otherwise, I'll move on.
I would just echo what Robert said. I was on site last month with a customer, 300 drivers, and our conversation was around their basic scores. and their basic scores were high. And what can we do to put a coaching program in just around specific areas of their basic scores? Because their quote to me was, "We are losing business because of these scores." Right? If all things are equal, pricing is equal, right? Everything is equal, service levels are equal. They are looking at our basic scores that are out there that are public, and they are saying, you know, we're going to go over here, right? We can't afford to have this type of risk. We need things delivered on time. We can't afford to have you pulled over. So we're going to go here. So that was their big focus. So, I mean, yeah, I 100% agree with Robert. I mean, getting, you know, you can't put a value to an accident that doesn't happen, but you, in a way you can.
Yeah, real quick, one other thing, from a litigation perspective, Jonathan, you brought it up. And more shippers, consignees, and brokers are being brought into litigation when there are accidents and crashes. So they are looking at these scores, and they're looking at carriers as a risk, their risk. So, you know, if they are paying attention at all to what's happening in litigation, nuclear verdicts, and they're going to be very sensitive to the scores of the carriers that they utilize.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I'd add is I'm gonna beat that prioritization drum again, because as much as we all know how valuable a solid safety program is and the real ROI that provides, I bet money none of us have more than half of the safety budget that we want. And so it's always going to be really important to figure out how to optimize what you're doing with all of the resources you have to bring to bear. And again, without going back too deep into it, I think that's a place where technology does help, right? Limited budget, not enough people. It's really critical. How do we make sure they're working on the right problems at the right times?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I want to move to our next poll question, and Robert, you touched on this. Jonathan, you mentioned it also. You know, and I think some fleets probably think about this, but some may not. But you know, given the current economic climate this year and coming into next year in an industry where arguably many companies are offering similar services, that safety record can be a differentiator and set a fleet apart from other competitors, especially if bidding for contracts is where bidding for contracts is a high priority. So I am curious though, how many people are actually thinking about their SMS scores as a differentiator and using those even in their own branding or marketing or the way they think about the fleet. And so I'm going to pull this one up, and then Robert, you will probably be on the hook to add your comments. So I'm going to launch this. So out of curiosity, how are you utilizing your fleet safety record in the current market environment? And I'll give people a little bit of time to answer. We'll get a few more in here. Okay. Give it just one more second here. Looks like we're kind of split for those who are using it and actually many who are not. All right, we'll go ahead and share these. People can take a look. And Robert, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Like I said, especially as a strategy coming into this next year. Jonathan, you mentioned, and obviously I was part of that conversation of like a fleet that's really focused on, hey, we want to improve in these 3 areas, looking at their basics. Robert, let's go with you. Thoughts?
Well, you know what this tells me, the answer to question number 5 tells me that we've brought some value to some of the people on the webinar. If they're not utilizing their scores in rate negotiations or discussions with customers, hopefully they will rethink that position. Obviously, we utilize it wherever we can. We're in negotiations right now for renewal for our insurance, so we're leveraging those scores and talking to markets. We have underwriters in the building yesterday and today And we're having those discussions and leveraging our safety program and our results with that through that process. Also, we're using that when we go to talk to customers, prospective or current customers, and really that's another thing that we need to do a better job of as we roll through this process of looking at what we're doing and reevaluating is, putting our scores out there for drivers to see and our customers to see, and showing that, safety is just not something that we talk about, but it's something that we perform, something that we live with, and something we strive to impact every day. So we are utilizing that, not as much as I would like, but we certainly are now, and we will in the future.
Awesome.
I'll just add on a little bit. I just looked down. I'm not going to show you the logo, but the pen in my hand happens to be from a fairly sizable insurance company. And I'll just say that I agree with you, Robert. This has a real impact on insurance, and it's going to have an increasing impact. So in the last 48 hours, I've been on calls with 3 large insurers or brokers in the industry, having pretty deep and meaningful conversations that have been going on for some time about exactly how they can incorporate telematics and safety data and information into their pricing processes, their underwriting decisions, their ongoing underwriting of policy renewal, those sorts of things. They're figuring it out, and they have a strong appetite to be able to attract the better risks. And they're looking for exactly how they get the data that's going to help them make those decisions. And my message to everybody on the call would be, this is a great opportunity for you to get ahead of the curve and position yourself to be very attractive to those insurers who really want to earn that kind of top tier business. And I think it's a great opportunity in the next year or two. And beyond that, it's probably going to be a negative for those people who are laggards, right? Because insurance is going to start to catch up. You won't be able to hide it. They're going to be getting this information one way or the other, and it's better for you to be in control of that safety program and can tell them that right narrative. They're going to want and demand to hear that story here in the very near future.
So if I could piggyback on that really quick, I know we're limited on time. If your broker, your insurance broker, individual insurance broker is not connected to major markets, and they are not telling your story, and they are not creating the narrative that you need to be carried into that negotiation for rates and premiums, then ask them, why not? Because this is so important to have the right person telling your unique story and representing you in the insurance negotiations. So that's just part of, shaking the tree. Do you have the right people representing you?
Yeah.
And I want to take a slightly different twist on this and just talk about, the publicizing a positive driver profile. And I get a warm and fuzzy. I don't know about you guys. When I see on LinkedIn, right, a fleet posting about a real driver and real, million safe miles out there, or what they're doing right and what they're doing safe, like that gives me a good feeling. And I think it's more than just putting it out there during Driver Appreciation Week, right? To do it throughout the year, right? To publicize those stories of what your drivers are doing is a great way to drive additional business too, by putting that image out there. So use LinkedIn, use your other social media that you have. And my other advice would be, if you don't have a marketing team, if you don't have someone that can help with this, partner with a vendor. If one of your vendors, they will bend over backwards to help you put out a combined story. They'll write everything. They'll put together the beautiful graphics for you, right? Work with your vendor, partner with them. They will take the lead, I have no doubt, and put out a positive, good feeling story about what you're doing around safety and always calling out a specific driver.
Yeah, absolutely. I have just two more questions before we wrap up, and I want to remind anyone who is here, if you have specific questions, now would be a great time to drop them in the QA or in the chat, and we can answer at the end. But you know, in our prep session, we talked a little bit, and kind of going back to, you know, even, I mean, I've seen terrible headlines of you know, trucking recession 2023, and like really dramatic kind of a sense of gloom and doom. And I think I said that the other day, and Robert, your response was, you know, it's cyclical. A lot of us have been there, done that before, that this will happen again. But I think for our employees that are going through this, and our drivers, you know, the driver retention even, and the driver shortage went down on ATRI's latest report. And so it seems like there's maybe a little bit of nuance where it's not so much maybe this critical driver shortage, although we still have a driver shortage, but the focus then becomes on retaining, maybe it's more about retaining the right drivers, not necessarily any and all drivers. So I'm curious, Robert, from a morale, culture, retention standpoint, how are you leading U.S. logistics through this time at that level?
Well, you have to know your drivers. You have to be able to identify who's performing, who's not performing, who's a risk, and who's not a risk. Are they an elevated risk? You have to know your drivers. So culture's one thing, you know, developing a culture that drivers are appreciated, and it comes from management, it comes from terminal facility relationships, it comes through HR, payroll. You know what, if sales doesn't understand the needs of the driver, then they may not sell the right freight. So it's all encompassing. So at the end of the day, it's a team effort, but it really comes down to culture. But I don't feel that there is a driver shortage. There's a shortage of good drivers. So identify the quality drivers that you want to build a nucleus around. Those are the drivers that you want to make sure that you are, I don't want to say protecting, because you don't want to necessarily protect anybody or treat anybody differently, but you want to make sure that at the end of the day, those are the drivers that stay with you. And then you evaluate your program. Do you need pair back drivers? Do you need to go out and find different business to keep these drivers busy during the slow period? But you know, there's different opportunities across the board for utilization. I just encourage everyone to get outside the box and look and see, you've got a truck and you've got a trailer, or you've got a box, and what can you do with it?
Yeah.
Start from there and work I mean, hauling ice cream, you know, can we haul ice cream in a dry box? Well, no, you can't. Mark that off the list. So everything should be on the table until it's not.
Yeah.
And that really is the way to work with drivers and retain drivers. Create that culture, create the environment that they feel like they want to be, that you want them there and they want to stay there. So it's all about relationships. There's, of course, money and equipment and all that goes into it, but it's about relationships. Sorry, Jonathan.
I was just going to add to that I was talking with Tracy Rushing over at ATRI Garrison, who's a director of safety over there. And what she was saying is that in the company, they have drivers and they have people that support the drivers. And you're in one of those two categories, right? So everything in their company is driver focused with the driver in mind. And I absolutely love that. And it's a hard distinction to make. But if you've got drivers and people that are supporting drivers, right, you're putting drivers at the front of your culture, and you're keeping them top of mind always as far as each decision that you're making.
We have just a couple more minutes. I do have a couple questions that have come in. I definitely want to end on a high note, because obviously we know we're going to have challenges here this next year, but there also has to be a level of optimism coming in. So I'm going to really give each of you kind of a chance to give your final words. But Robert, I'm going to get your perspective on this question that came in first. The question is, how can fleets better educate drivers on what a CSA basic scores are and what they should mean to a driver?
Communication's key, right? So driver meetings, discussing them in driver meetings, explaining exactly what goes into the CSA score, what the violations mean, and how it impacts not only the company, but that individual driver. If a driver gets a violation, it's on their record for 3 years. So they need to understand, you need to have that communication, and not just one driver meeting, not just one conversation with a driver, but continually discussing what these CSA scores are and how they impact the organization. And the other thing I would do is every month that they come out, I would post those. So every driver sees every month what your CSA scores are, and hopefully sees the progress in reducing those CSA scores.
Thank you. All right, so Jonathan, I'm going to have you start off, and I'm going to launch our final poll, and people can answer this as we're dialoguing. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and the quote that's going to define how you think about this next year. Jonathan, you're going to get about 30 seconds, but the question is, what's your level of optimism or outlook on the trucking industry coming into 2024?
So my level of optimism is obviously incredibly high. I'm a very optimistic person, so I can't go any other way but being very bullish on what's going on within the industry. Steve Jobs had a quote, and it's innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. And I love that, because when we talk about different ways to innovate, it can mean so many different things, and just doesn't have to be around technology, right? You can innovate within a safety team. You can find ways to be more efficient as a safety team. You can do things you've never done before. Or you can take the approach of, we're just going to keep doing the same thing and hoping and expecting maybe different results. But really, you need to have innovation at the forefront as we come into 2024. That can be around technology. It can be around your safety team, your processes, anything around there.
Awesome. Thank you. Robert.
Yep. So I'm moderate. I think that in the first and second quarter, I think things are going to be very challenging for the transportation industry as a whole. In the third quarter and fourth quarter, I think things will really pick up. And into 25, I think they will be on the uphill side. I really think that our industry will flourish. Like you said earlier, you have to go through these peaks and valleys because capacity has to tighten, and it's just the nature of this industry.
Yeah. Yep. And Brian, quick last word.
Yeah, not a lot to add to that other than within difficulty lies opportunity, and take this as an opportunity, right? We might be going through some challenging times. It gives you the motivation and the necessity to go through and really look at things in a new perspective, take things a level deeper, and you're going to discover some things that are going to be valuable to you, not just in solving the immediate short-term issues, but is going to be useful to you in 25 and in 26 and in 27, right? So look at this as an opportunity to find